as we approach the new year, many local offices will have new occupants. And one of them is the Suffolk County District Attorney. For the first time in 20 years, a Republican will hold that seat. And this morning, we're going on the record with Suffolk District Attorney-elect Ray Tierney, and he is joining me now. So, Ray Tierney, thank you for being here. Congratulations on your win.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks for having me.
Of course. So let's start with the election yourself. Your opponent outspent you by over $1 million, but you had a convincing victory here. Were you surprised?
No, I wasn't. I think that I worked, we worked really hard. And one of the things about not having a lot of institutional support or a lot of money is you have to get out into the public. And I crisscrossed Suffolk County, and I really, caught the sentiment that people were ready for a change.
And so let's talk about that change. You spent years in Brooklyn at the U.S. Attorney's Office and as an executive district attorney working for DA Eric Gonzalez, a Democrat, by the way. So what changes do you plan to bring to the Suffolk County DA office?
I think what we really need to do is we need to move the resources of the office into the courtroom, make sure that we're, despite the many challenges that we face as an office, that we prosecute the cases in a timely and effective fashion. I also want to be a little bit more transparent, and I want to do a lot of community outreach.
Yeah, transparency is key, especially when it comes to a district attorney's office. I want to talk about the topic of bail reform. There's been a lot of discussion around this, and you've actually said, quote, bail reform is a bad law. It does not keep us safe, end quote. So why do you actually think that is?
Well, I think first and foremost, the worst part about bail reform or the bail law is that it takes the discretion, and you have the legislators in Albany who they substitute their discretion for the discretion of the experts in the courtroom, and I'm speaking of the litigants and the judge. So you have instances where they're making hard and fast rules across the board that must be followed no matter what. And that's why you see a lot of the things, a lot of the absurd results where you have this revolving door of justice where people who commit certain crimes are getting out over and over again no matter what.
Okay, and so you ran on that, right? And so bail reform came from Albany, and it came from those lawmakers. You're talking about that. So then it exists, right? So how can you as a district attorney actually implement change to bail reform when it actually comes out of Albany?
Well, I mean, I think what I can do with not only with bail reform, but with all criminal justice reform, with like less is more, parole reform, I could talk about these laws and how I can talk about how they're in certain respects ineffective and don't keep us safe. That's one. That's part one. Part two is notwithstanding the law, you have to still fight to keep people safe, fight to be an effective prosecutor. And I think that's what we need to do is we need to work within the existing framework to be more effective.
So what about the counter argument here, right? Because bail reform came from a rally cry, not only in our area, but around the country, that innocent people are kept in prison that just cannot afford bail. What do you do for those folks? How do you reach them?
Well, I mean, I think you have a system, like I come from the federal system where, it's a cashless bail system. But you're allowed to consider dangerousness to the community and risk of flight. In New York State, we're not allowed to consider those factors. So I think that when you talk about criminal justice reform, there's nothing wrong with reforming criminal justice or any system, but it just has to be effective and it has to make sense. And this law flat out doesn't work.
So if you could tweak it, how would you tweak it?
I mean, I think really you got to start over. And I think what you have to do is, first and foremost, you have to have a system where there's built-in discretion for the litigants that they could use their discretion in certain instances that call for it, number one. And number two is you have to have a situation where you're allowed to consider a person's dangerousness and risk to the community, because otherwise, you're going to have bad results.
Only have 30 seconds left here, but guns and gangs seem to be a persistent problem in specific neighborhoods in Suffolk County. Briefly, how do you plan to get a handle on them?
Well, first off, we have to, the first part of addressing the problem is understanding you have one. So we have to be open and transparent and understand that in a lot of our underserved communities, shots are being fired and there are these violent acts being committed primarily by gang members. So you need to address it effectively, and we're going to do that in much the manner I did when I worked in Brooklyn.
Look forward to talking to you more. You are welcome back on this program anytime. District Attorney-elect Ray Tierney, thank you for being here on Picks on Politics.
Thank you so much, Dan.